all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today James Peake. Some of you may remember him as Dr. Peake. Some of you may remember him as Secretary of Veterans Affairs, James Peake. He's now in the private sector working with CGI that we're going to talk about a little bit about what that does. But Dr. Peake, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Jim, it's good to be with you today. Appreciate it.
And I think I left out one of your titles, actually. Some of the you out there will remember that he retired as a lieutenant general. He was the Surgeon General of the Army. He served 38 years in the Army, including starting at West Point, did a stint in Vietnam. Importantly, his mother was an Army nurse. There's how you got on the path you got on, I suspect, Dr. Peake.
My dad was a medical service corps officer. I think genetically I couldn't have done anything else.
Yeah, it looks like they headed you in the right direction. And this is interesting after your service in Vietnam, where you were awarded a Silver Star and a Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart with Oak Leaves. You found yourself saying, hey, maybe it's time to go back to medical school, and you did that at, I believe, was it Cornell University?
Cornell.
And then got back. Were you continued in the service through the medical school?
I did. I was in the first, it was a demonstration program at the time that allowed folks to go into medical school. So it was a precursor to the scholarship program that has been so successful for the Army and the military in general for the last several decades.
No, that's fantastic, and again, you kind of got set on this course, maybe because of the family connections, but you served 38 years in the Army and had all kinds of interesting careers, didn't you?
Absolutely. I feel very fortunate. Sometimes I feel like I'm Walter Mitty,
Well, we can't take the time to read all the places you went and all of the jobs you held and the resulting awards and decorations that came out of that, including Distinguished Service Medal. I mentioned the Silver Star already. And then you kind of culminated that with the 40th Surgeon General of the Army. That had to be an interesting capstone to your career.
It was wonderful. It was opportunity, and I was just so fortunate to have such great people to work with. The folks that served in that office, from my aide-de-camps to my executive officers to the leaders of all of the subordinate organizations, were just outstanding. I couldn't have been more fortunate.
Well, there's a myriad of important issues that have to be dealt with when you're in that role, not only from a budgetary standpoint, but looking ahead as to what the medical problems, the toxicity problems, what troops might be exposed to in terms of,
Sure.
Gas and anthrax and all of that. So all of those kind of decisions have to come through the Surgeon General's office to weigh in on. So it maybe prepared you for what you were going to do post-service. Again, one of those things you said, probably never thought you'd be the appointed the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. But when the president calls and asks you to do it in December of 2007, you said yes.
I feel like I was extremely fortunate to have that opportunity. And when I went back I'd been out of the military for several years. I'd worked in the humanitarian world with Project Hope as a chief operating officer, and with QTC Management, which was a company that served veterans in the VA, doing medical examinations. But when I went back into the VA, I felt sort of like I was back home, because I had been taking care of soldiers all my life, and I felt it was a continuation of that same mission. And many of the people in the VA are folks that I'd worked with in the military. About 31% of the VA at that time were veterans themselves. So it was really a feeling of coming back to a common mission with great people.
And for folks who are trying to set this in their own brain in terms of timing, Secretary Jim Nicholson preceded you, and Secretary Eric Shinseki followed you. You were appointed by George W. Bush and served for roughly 2 years, 2008 and 2009. And again, there are all kinds of big policy issues that roll by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs desk. After you got out of that work, you went back into the private sector, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. As I say, you're currently with CGI. But as somebody who's been serving veterans for most, if not all, of your career, the VA gets bad press more often than it probably should, but it is a big bureaucracy, and you saw that internally when you were there. As you look at it today, have the problems changed? Have just been a shifting in the things that you were working on, or have those problems been solved and we're now working with new problems at the VA?
Well, to your point, the VA is the second largest government agency after the Department of Defense. It is a very human kind of business. It's got three major lines of business. One is the cemeteries. The National Cemetery System has extraordinarily high satisfaction by those family members who lay their veterans to rest there, and it's ubiquitously available really across the United States to very, very high standards. It's got the Veterans Benefit Administration, which has insurance pieces to it. It's got loan guarantee programs. It's got various support for veterans in the form of education benefits, in the form of payment for their disability claims. Just as an example of the multi lines of business that come under the VBA, the Veterans Benefits Administration. And then there's the Veterans Health Administration, which is arguably the largest integrated delivery system in the nation, with well over 1,000 points of care, to include major medical centers to local community-based outpatient clinics and vet centers that support our veterans. So it is a big organization, but it's an organization that touches people every day, and so and rightfully the American public holds it to a very high standard. which in fact it meets.
Yeah, which we should, right? These men, now more women, go to the VA. Some 9 million veterans annually get their health care through the VHA.
There's about 19 million veterans in the United States now. That's down from 23 million or so when I was secretary, because the World War II generation is passing on. And it actually is my Vietnam generation that really is the larger portion of the veteran population now, and they are aging. I guess I resemble that remark.
Right, exactly. I think many of us do. But the problems that the VA challenges, maybe is a better word, that the VA has, continues with this, things like, and you probably heard this when you were the secretary, your budget is ballooning. It's now $240 billion. I don't know what it was back in your time, but how do we keep providing the resources that are necessary while at the same time expanding access to disability benefits? Because there are new issues that have arisen over time.
That's correct. And the PACT Act recently passed by Congress to deal with the issues of toxic exposures, really, the burn pits. And they've also reached back into the Vietnam era with Agent Orange, expanding some of the presumptions with that and so forth. But those are legislated by the representatives of the American people. I think there is an obligation for the executive branch and the leadership under, I think Dennis McDonough is just an outstanding secretary, but to try to be more efficient. How do you leverage technology? How do you provide the very best care to keep people well and rather than letting them get sick? And how do you be proactive about it? All those things can lead to better use of funds, but it's an expensive proposition, and the American people have continually recently supported it, and Congress is very supportive of the VA because of the mission.
Well, we saw some real advances, I think, in use of technology by the VA and acceptance by veterans. So that was part of the reluctance, I think, too, that COVID brought along when they expanded their telemedicine reach. I've heard from a lot of folks that they really do like that ability to get on a virtual meeting with their doctor or their nurse practitioner and have that discussion. That's the sort of efficiency and technology you're talking about, I think.
It is, and the VA has been a leader in the area of telemedicine for a long time. They were prepared. The ground had already been plowed for when the COVID pandemic hit. And the VA, like the rest of American medicine, moved to a telemedicine platform. I think there's no going back. It's and the leaders in that area, like Dr. Neil Evans, as an example, continue to lead the way in providing quality telemedicine services that are integrated into the rest of the VA care.
From your level, which is sort of this macro level now as a former Secretary of VA and with all of your experience, there's been a lot of push to get care out into the community. I think there's been various reasons why people have been pushing that, but give us your big picture view on that effort.
Well, I think it is, you're right. The Mission Act and before that, an earlier act allowed veterans to have access. I think they're still working through the details of how best to do that. What is it's an opportunity to improve access to care, to improve convenience of care. But what you also want to balance it with is the continuity of care. And so the VA is really looking to how to best make sure that the veteran gets the best care at the right place. And if the VA itself, in many cases, the VA itself does really has unique services that the civilian world isn't used to providing in the veteran experience. And, PTSD is one example. And that's where telemedicine can really help with in that regard by allowing the VA to provide some of those kinds of services remotely. Things like spinal cord injury, our prosthetics care are examples of where the VA really focuses on the veteran experience and understands the environment from which they came.
And you've touched on something again with we're talking to Dr. James Peake, who's a former secretary of the VA. VA has this unique medical experience with some of those things that you've just mentioned because of its cohort that it serves. But I don't think people realize, and I guess I'd like you to talk a little bit about the research and the training that the VA does.
The VA trains probably 70% of our medical workforce at one point or another. When I was at Cornell, I rotated at the Manhattan VA for neurology, as an example. But it is very, very common for our medical professionals, not just doctors, but nurses as well, to train in VA facilities. So that's one thing. The research that goes on in the VA has been going on for a long time and is often partnered with our academic medical center partners. Things like the first pacemaker came out of the VA, liver transplant out of the VA. There are Lasker Award winners. I forget the exact number, 6 or 7 or 8 Lasker Award winners. One of the highest research awards there are out of the VA. And a lot of the VA research is really focused on that veteran and their experience. Now, obviously, as an example, when we were dealing mostly with and very heavily with the World War II veteran population, those diseases of aging and so forth that we were able to study in that population allowed those kinds of scientific findings to be translated to the wider audience of the people of this medical science. So, the VA has played an important role in medical research for many, many, many years.
Yeah, and that information goes while its primary focus is on the veterans, that information gets out to the whole world, and ultimately the dollars we're spending on the VA research budget helps all of us get better medical care. As you mentioned, things like pacemakers and liver transplants and prosthetics, really some amazing research that comes out of the VA. They really ought to do a better job of publicizing that because I think it often gets lost as well as their training. That 70% of doctors and nurses go through VA training. I don't know that the average person, or even the average veteran, recognizes that. It's really quite impressive. Yeah. What do you, Dr. Peake, before we transition here, what's the biggest challenge you see that the VA is facing here as we go into 2023?
Well, I think there's tactical issues like getting the PACT Act in place and serving veterans quickly. Every time you get new legislation, you get a fairly short timeline to try to get it going. And it takes systems changes, it takes workflow changes and so forth, and outreach changes. So, those are tactical things. And I know from talking to the secretary and other leaders within the VA, they are all over it and really trying very hard to move along in consistent with the intent of Congress and President Biden's personal push on it. But I would say strategically, you sit back and you say just what you spoke about earlier, in that the cost of the VA has increased significantly and non-linearly over time. And the question is, how long can that go? And over time, you've got a shrinking veteran population. So, what are the adjustments that are going to have to be made with the VA over time? There was an heirs commission that was in part of the National Defense Authorization Act that was going to have a look at the asset alignment of the VA. There's a lot of old facilities and old hospitals and in places where the veteran population is no longer as big as it was. So the ability to manage that kind of enterprise-wide capital assets is going to be an important piece for the VA to move forward. The heirs commission was stopped, but the secretary still has a responsibility for managing those assets, and he needs the tools to be able to do that.
Yeah, and part of your budget's going into old buildings and
old
locations that maybe it'd be better to readjust on. So,
sure.
Interesting. We're talking to Lieutenant General James Peake, retired from the U.S. Army. He's a doctor, medical doctor, served as the Secretary of the VA, and is now the Senior Vice President for Health Industry, I believe is the long title for CGI Group. Do I have the title right there, Doctor?
Yeah, that's correct, Senior Vice President, exactly.
So CGI Group is a very large information technology business serving really a worldwide population. Tell us about CGI a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the need and the attempts to attract veterans to CGI. Sure.
CGI is a global, it's probably the fifth largest global IT end-to-end services provider. We're in about 40 countries, about 400 offices worldwide. We have subsidiaries in the United States. There's a federal subsidiary where I actually hang my hat, serves the various agencies of the federal government. But we have a commercial, state, and local government portion of the United States operation as well. But we will work with very innovative technologies, new technologies, and apply them to the end-to-end support of our various customers, whether commercial or government.
As I said, this is a very large corporation, international in scope, listed on the stock exchanges, that sort of size company. But one of the challenges every company has, no matter how big or small you are at the moment, has to do with attracting new employees, and certainly in the tech field, that technical consulting field that CGI is in, that's, I'm sure, a yearly challenge. Talk to us a little bit about that challenge and its particular focus on trying to have veterans look at CGI as an employer of choice.
CGI, as probably every company, and the VA, as an example of challenges, is always looking for high quality talent. And so we actually have what we call onshore centers that are often in rural areas. We have a center that we've located deliberately in Belton, Texas, which is right outside the gates, basically, of Fort Hood, Fort Cabezas now, I believe, and where you have 52,000 soldiers and their family members. So what we find is just really great talent of people that say, if I'm leaving the service, I want to stay in this area, and because it's affordable and I'm still connected with my military friends and benefits and so forth. And so they bring their leadership experience to CGI. They bring their technical talent to CGI. They bring their initiative, and their desire to continue to develop their careers and learn and be a part of us. Oftentimes, if they decide later they want to move, because we are a global company and really have offices all over the United States, they can move, and in many cases, we can let them work remotely to be a part of our team. So it's we value the experience that our veterans have had in their military, which from whatever branch, and it's not only just their technical expertise, but their leadership and their initiative and their work ethic that is attractive to us.
As you say, because of your CGI's large footprint, there's a lot of mobility opportunity, and I assume both geographically, but also up the corporate chain to get more and more responsibility over time and everything that goes with that. Dr. Peake, if somebody's interested in learning more about CGI and maybe poking around to see if some job there might be a good fit for them, how do they do that? It sometimes can be confusing to reach out to a large corporation.
Well, you can go to our website at CGI-veterans.jobs. It's dedicated to veterans, transitioning service members. It includes job seekers, translator, and a military codes processor to produce civilian job opportunities that match the specific military expertise. We have done a number of service to civilian job fairs, two recently, where I'm trying to remember the number of folks that we interviewed. We offered internships to 10 people right then and there. And those, as you suggested, are starting positions that can lead to a full career in CGI. You can develop and grow and take advantage of the internal technical training that we provide, as well as the professional development that you get from the folks that are mentors. I'm part of what we call our member resource group for veterans and military affiliate folks. And that's part of what we try to do, is promote the camaraderie of the veterans within CGI. So they have somebody that can touch base with, that has had maybe shared experiences. Some of our members in the member resource group are spouses, because we hire military spouses, and they are active participants as well.
As I bring this to the close, I want to point out something that Dr. Peake just mentioned, that I can't think of the last employer who recognized this, and that is, you mentioned that on the website there's a military codes processor to help translate what somebody's MOS is or was in the military to maybe what they could do in the civilian world. And so often that gets lost. The employer has no idea what you really did in the military. They just go, oh, you were in the Army. And it ends there. So when this demonstrates to me that CGI knows what it's talking about, knows how to translate and help transition. So again, that website is http://CGI-veterans.jobs. That's where you go and get this information. Dr. Peake, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today to give us your insights into the VA as it currently faces the challenges in the upcoming year, but also telling our listeners about CGI and what opportunities might be available.
Jim, thank you very much for the opportunity to spend the afternoon with you.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Press Corn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. We appreciate all your support. You can go to veteransradio.net, click on the sponsor level, and continue to support keeping Veterans Radio on the air. And until next time, you are dismissed.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.